1943. Somewhere in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, a converted Liberty ship plows through rough seas, its cargo hold packed with German prisoners of war, hundreds of men recently captured in North Africa, heading to a place most of them have never seen. America. They've been told stories about this place. Nazi propaganda painted it as weak, divided, on the verge of collapse. A nation of gangsters and decadence, crumbling under the weight of its own contradictions. The prisoners huddle in the hold, seasick, uncertain, wondering what awaits them. What they're about to discover will shatter everything they've been taught. The reality of America in 1943 is so far removed from Nazi propaganda that some of these men will question their entire worldview. By the time they set foot on American soil, see the abundance, experience the treatment they'll receive, thousands will make a decision that would shock their former commanders. They'll choose to stay. 5,000 German prisoners of war will eventually emigrate to America after the war ends, unable to forget what they witnessed during their captivity. This isn't the story you learned in school. This is about the most unusual sight these German soldiers encountered. Not military might or technological superiority, though America had plenty of both. What stunned them, what changed them, what made them reconsider everything they'd fought for, was something far more powerful. It was abundance in the middle of a global war. It was kindness toward enemies. It was a nation so confident in its strength that it could afford generosity even to those who tried to destroy it. 425,000 German prisoners of war passed through American camps between 1942 and 1946. Their stories reveal a side of World War II that rarely gets told, the moment when enemy soldiers realized they'd been lied to about everything. The journey across the Atlantic is the first shock. These men expected to be treated as enemies, as prisoners, as barely human. Instead, they're served substantial meals. Real meat, fresh vegetables, white bread that tastes like a luxury they haven't experienced in months. Some haven't eaten this well since before the war started in 1939. The contrast with their rations in the Africa Corps is staggering. There, they subsisted on canned goods, stale bread, whatever could be scrounged from the desert. Here, on a prison transport ship crossing an ocean, they're eating better than they did as free soldiers. The fear during the crossing is palpable. German U-boats patrol these waters. The irony isn't lost on anyone. They could be torpedoed by their own navy, sent to the bottom along with their American captors. Every sound, every shudder of the ship makes them wonder if this is it. But the journey continues without incident. The Allied convoy system works. They arrive safely. New York, Norfolk, Virginia, the ports where the Liberty ships dock. What happens next defies everything these prisoners expected. They're not marched off at gunpoint into brutal holding pens. They're processed efficiently, given medical examinations, and then loaded onto trains. But not cattle cars, not the kind of grim transport they'd expect for prisoners. Pullman cars, passenger trains with comfortable seating, clean interiors, modern amenities. One prisoner later writes about this moment. We thought we were being transported like criminals, treated like animals. Then we saw the trains. They were nicer than anything we'd ridden in Germany as civilians. The confusion is visible on their faces. Is this some kind of trick? Some elaborate deception before the real punishment begins? The journey inland provides another shock. They press their faces to the windows, watching America roll past. And what they see contradicts every piece of propaganda they've ever heard. The cities aren't bombed out. There are no ruins, no craters, no destruction. The factories are intact, running at full capacity, smoke pouring from chimneys. At night, the cities are lit up. Street lights, house lights, neon signs. No blackouts. No fear of air raids. America has never been touched by this war. And it shows. The sheer scale of the country overwhelms them. They travel for days, passing through states larger than entire German regions. Farmland stretches to the horizon in every direction. Crops grow in abundance. Livestock grazes peacefully. This is a nation that's not just surviving the war, it's thriving. The camps themselves are spread across 45 states, 700 camps in total, from Texas to California, from the Midwest to remote locations in South Dakota and Montana. The distribution is strategic. Spread them out. Make escape pointless. Where would they run? How would they survive in a country where they don't speak the language, don't know the geography, and stick out like a sore thumb? The Geneva Convention dictates the standards for prisoner treatment. Living quarters must be equivalent to what's provided to the captor nation's own soldiers. America takes this seriously. The prisoners are housed in barracks with 40 square feet per enlisted man, 120 square feet for officers. It's more space than many had in their own homes back in Germany. The barracks are heated in winter, ventilated in summer. The beds have mattresses, real mattresses, not straw sacks. The officers get special treatment. 3 admirals and 40 generals are among the captured German military leadership. Each receives a private bungalow. Some have small gardens where they can grow vegetables or flowers. Mississippi becomes home to several high-ranking officer camps. The locals are bemused. Enemy generals living better than some American families just down the road, tending tomato plants like suburban retirees. But here's where the story takes a dark turn, a turn that reveals the ugly truth about America, even in its finest hour. German prisoners of war are treated better than black American soldiers. The camps are integrated in ways that the U.S. military itself isn't. German POWs can use recreational facilities, officers' clubs, restaurants that black servicemen are barred from entering. One laundry in the South famously washes clothes for German prisoners but refuses to touch uniforms worn by Tuskegee airmen. The irony is bitter and impossible to ignore. America extends more courtesy to enemy combatants than to its own citizens, based solely on skin color. Eric Glowania is 17 years old when he's captured at Normandy. Just a kid, really, caught up in a war he barely understands. His recollection of captivity is stunning in its simplicity. As soon as we were in American hands, we had it good. All the hunger vanished just like that. Everything was perfect. He's not exaggerating. Compared to the constant deprivation of military service under the Third Reich, captivity in America is a revelation. The prisoners gain weight, not a little weight, significant amounts. The Red Cross inspectors who visit the camps noted in their reports. These men are healthier as prisoners than they were as soldiers. The food is abundant, varied, and prepared by cooks who actually know what they're doing. Breakfast might include eggs, bacon, toast, coffee with real sugar and cream. Lunch could be soup, sandwiches, fruit. Dinner features meat, potatoes, vegetables, dessert. It's not gourmet cuisine, but it's consistent, nutritious, and plentiful. The psychological impact of this abundance cannot be overstated. These men have been told for years that America is weak, that its people are soft and lazy, that its economy is failing. Everything they see contradicts that narrative. The cognitive dissonance is overwhelming. Daily life in the camps develops its own rhythm. There's structure, routine, but also surprising freedom within the barbed wire confines. Sports become a major pastime. Soccer matches between different barracks, volleyball tournaments, even makeshift boxing rings. The Americans provide equipment, encourage the activity. Healthy prisoners are easier to manage than bored, resentful ones. Theater productions are organized. The prisoners build stages, sew costumes from whatever materials they can scrounge, perform classic German plays and operas. Some camps have full orchestras. Musicians who played in German military bands now perform Beethoven and Wagner for audiences of fellow prisoners and occasionally American guards. The cultural life is richer than many small German towns had before the war. Hans Wecker is held at Fort Robinson in Nebraska. His memories of captivity stand in stark contrast to his life in Germany. Cold water, flats back home. No central heating, shared bathrooms, constant struggle to make ends meet. At Fort Robinson, he has hot showers, heated barracks, regular meals. The treatment was excellent, he later writes. The food was excellent, the clothing adequate. It's not effusive praise, but coming from a German soldier, it's remarkable. The pay is what really gets them. 80 cents per day for work. It's mandated by the Geneva Convention. Prisoners who work must be paid at the same rate as the captor nation's military. 80 cents doesn't sound like much, but in 1943, it's real money. More importantly, there's a camp canteen where prisoners can spend it, and that canteen stocks items that have been unavailable in Germany for years. Günter Greve faces a dilemma that would seem absurd to anyone back home. Should I buy ice cream or Coca-Cola first? The last ice cream I bought in Germany was years ago. Think about that. A prisoner of war in enemy territory has access to luxury items that free German civilians can't obtain. Ice cream, soda, candy bars, cigarettes, real coffee, all available for purchase with earned wages. Religious services are permitted. Protestant, Catholic, even Jewish services for the small number of Jewish Germans who somehow ended up in Wehrmacht uniforms. Chaplains visit. Bibles are provided. Education classes spring up organically. Prisoners teach each other languages, mathematics, trade skills. English lessons are particularly popular. They know this war will end eventually, and English might be useful in whatever comes next. One prisoner describes it perfectly. A sort of golden cage. The metaphor is apt. Yes, they're confined. Yes, there's barbed wire and guards with rifles. But within those confines, life is comfortable, safe, and structured. For young men who've spent years in combat, constantly facing death, this is paradise. The lack of girlfriends and family contact is painful, but compared to dodging bullets in North Africa or freezing in Russia, it's a price they're willing to pay. America has a problem. Millions of men are overseas fighting. The farms, factories, and mills need workers. The harvest can't wait. The crops won't pick themselves. Enter the solution that makes economic sense but creates moral outrage. Put the prisoners to work. The Geneva Convention allows this, with restrictions. Prisoners cannot be forced to work on war materials. No building bombers, no making ammunition, no contributing directly to the war effort against their own country. But agricultural work, construction, manufacturing civilian goods, all permitted. The U.S. government sets up a system. Farmers and businesses request workers. The government assigns prisoners, transports them to work sites, supervises the labor. The employer pays 45 cents per hour per laborer to the government. The prisoners get their 80 cents a day regardless of hours worked. Kelly Holthus farms in Nebraska. His memories are matter of fact. They worked across the road from us, stacked hay, harvested sugar beets, such a shortage of labor we couldn't have managed without them. This is the reality of wartime America. Enemy soldiers working in fields while American boys fight overseas. The irony is thick, but the economic necessity is undeniable. The prisoners work hard, some because they're disciplined soldiers accustomed to following orders, some because the work keeps them busy, makes the time pass faster, some because they genuinely enjoy being useful, contributing, feeling like more than just mouths to feed. The farmers generally report satisfaction with their labor. They're efficient, competent, and don't complain. Theodore Gintz is assigned to a work detail near a small town. One day he observes something that changes his entire perspective. People in town were on strike over the price of overalls. He can't believe it. Workers are protesting, demanding higher wages, refusing to work until their demands are met, and nobody gets arrested, nobody gets shot, nobody disappears in the night. This is unthinkable to us, he later writes. I realized this was only possible in a democracy. The newspapers are another revelation. German newspapers, when available at all, only showed enemy casualties, pictures of dead British soldiers, destroyed Russian tanks, crashed American bombers. Always the enemy losing, never German dead. American newspapers are different. They show both sides. Photos of American casualties from the Pacific, names and hometowns of the dead, political cartoons mocking President Roosevelt, editorials criticizing military strategy. It's all legal. It's all public. It's all protected speech. This concept of a free press is alien to Germans who've lived under totalitarian control for a decade. They debate it among themselves in the barracks at night. How can a nation allow such open criticism and still function? How can morale survive when newspapers publish photos of your own dead? The answer gradually becomes clear. Democracy is messy and loud, but it's also resilient. People can handle the truth. They don't need to be protected from reality by a propaganda ministry. Some work details are almost comical. Africa Corps soldiers in Colorado still wearing their desert uniforms, short-sleeved khaki shirts designed for North African heat, working in fields with snow on the ground. The Army eventually issues them warmer clothing, but for a while they're shivering in attire meant for temperatures 40 degrees warmer. American and German officers exchange salutes when paths cross. Military protocol is maintained. They're equals in rank, even if one side won and one side lost. Respect between professionals, regardless of the circumstances. Not everyone is happy about this arrangement. In fact, most Americans are furious. The government receives hundreds of letters every week demanding that the prisoners be treated more harshly. Some correspondents suggest execution. Others want them starved, worked to death, punished for every American casualty. The rage is understandable. Gold Star banners hang in windows across America, each one marking a son who won't come home. And meanwhile, the men who fought for Hitler are eating 3 square meals and playing. Volleyball, the optics are terrible. Americans are living under rationing. Butter, sugar, meat, gasoline, all limited. Victory gardens are promoted as patriotic duty because food needs to go to the troops. And then people see German POWs working locally, looking healthy and well-fed. Why are we feeding them steak while our boys die? The question appears in letter after letter to congressmen and newspapers. Labor unions oppose POW labor on different grounds. These are jobs that could go to Americans. Every prisoner picking cotton or stacking hay is a job not available to a civilian worker. During a war where everyone's supposed to sacrifice, using enemy labor feels like cheating. The government tries to explain. The labor shortage is real. Without POWs, crops will rot in fields. The harvest can't wait for American workers who don't exist. The Geneva Convention justification is harder for the public to swallow. We treat them well, so Germany treats our POWs well. It makes logical sense. It's sound policy, but it requires people to think strategically while their emotions are running hot. A Gallup poll in November 1943 shows that 74% of Americans blame the German government for the war, not individual German soldiers. There's a distinction in people's minds between the Nazi regime and the young men drafted into service. But that intellectual distinction doesn't eliminate the visceral anger at seeing the enemy in their backyards. Congress launches an investigation into whether the camps are coddling prisoners. The hearings produce colorful testimony. Camp Trinidad in Colorado becomes a focal point. The commanding officer is accused of having un-American ideas and catering to prisoners. He's removed from duty. His crime? Treating the POWs humanely, allowing them recreational activities, maintaining discipline without brutality. In the hyper-patriotic atmosphere of wartime, even basic decency toward the enemy is suspect. Soldiers at Camp Hale watch German prisoners march and sing every morning. The Germans maintain military bearing, moving in formation, voices raised in traditional military songs. Meanwhile, American troops train in brutal mountain conditions, preparing for combat in the Italian Alps. The contrast breeds resentment. The Germans are safe, comfortable, out of the war. The Americans are heading into it. Some American soldiers openly express envy of the POWs. At least they know they'll survive. The bitter pill for many Americans is seeing prisoners better fed than some civilians. Rural areas, particularly in the South, have families struggling with poverty, sharecroppers, tenant farmers, people barely scraping by even before the war. And down the road, at the POW camp, enemy soldiers are gaining weight. The injustice is visible and infuriating. Not all prisoners are grateful for their treatment. About 10% remain hardcore Nazis, true believers who see cooperation with Americans as treason. These men are dangerous, not to the guards, but to fellow prisoners. They enforce discipline among the POWs, punish anyone who seems too friendly with Americans, maintain the party line that Germany will still win. Alva, Oklahoma becomes home to a special camp. It's for the hardliners, the unrepentant Nazis, the prisoners who cause trouble at other camps. The conditions aren't brutal, but they're deliberately less comfortable. A message is sent. Play nice, follow the rules, and you get the standard treatment. Make trouble, cling to ideology, and you get isolation. Bread and water rations. Solitary confinement. The punishment isn't cruel, but it's enough to make most reconsider their stance. The majority of prisoners, though, have no Nazi sympathies. They're conscripts, draftees, young men who joined the military because that's what young German men did. The propaganda seemed believable when you're 18 and everyone around you believes it. But captivity provides time for reflection, exposure to alternative perspectives, opportunities to question everything you've been told. Fort Eustis, Virginia hosts the re-education program. 26,000 Germans cycle through a 6-day course in democracy. The curriculum covers 12 topics: American government structure, free press principles, capitalism, and market economics, the Bill of Rights, federalism, civilian control of military. Each topic is designed to present an alternative to totalitarianism. The instructors are careful. This isn't presented as propaganda, but as information. Here's how we do things. Here's why we do them this way. Make up your own mind. The most controversial part of re-education is screening footage from concentration camp liberations, Buchenwald, Dachau, Bergen-Belsen. The images are horrific. Mountains of bodies, living skeletons, mass graves. Many prisoners claim they didn't know. They were soldiers, not SS. They fought on the front, not in the camps. The instructors don't argue. They just show the evidence and let it speak for itself. English classes become unexpectedly popular. Some prisoners see practical value. If they're going to be here for years, might as well learn the language. Others have deeper motivations. They're planning for a future where Germany loses, Hitler is gone, and they need to rebuild. English is the language of the victors. Better to learn it now. Ernst Funke corresponds with 80 fellow POWs after the war. Their letters reveal a common theme. No re-education was necessary. We became convinced Democrats through our treatment. The formal program helps, but the real conversion happens through daily experience, seeing abundance, experiencing fairness, witnessing freedom of speech, living in a system where even the lowest-ranking prisoner has rights that are respected. That's more persuasive than any lecture. The gap between Nazi propaganda and observed reality becomes impossible to ignore. They were told America was weak. They see factories operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They hear that a B-24 bomber rolls off the production line every 63 minutes. The Ford Willow Run plant in Michigan produces 1 bomber per hour. The industrial capacity is staggering, beyond anything Germany can match. They were told America was divided, on the verge of collapse. They see cities lit up at night, women shopping in stores fully stocked with goods, cars on every street, workers living in homes with electricity, running water, indoor plumbing. The standard of living for an average American factory worker exceeds what a German aristocrat enjoyed before the war. The psychological impact is devastating to those who believe the propaganda. If America is this strong, this wealthy, this united, what chance did Germany ever have? The war is lost. It was always going to be lost. The realization hits at different times for different prisoners, but it hits hard. The newspapers continue to blow minds. Photos of both sides' casualties. That's standard, but political cartoons mocking Roosevelt are something else entirely. One shows the president with exaggerated features, satirizing his policies. In Germany, drawing such a cartoon about Hitler would result in immediate execution. Here, it's protected speech. The cartoonist isn't arrested. The newspaper isn't shut down. Life continues normally. Don Kerr delivers milk in Kansas. His route takes him past a POW work camp. He interacts with prisoners regularly, exchanging pleasantries, sometimes sharing cigarettes. I talked to several, he recalls decades later. I thought they were very nice. This casual humanization happens across America. Small interactions that break down the mental barrier between enemy and person. The Germans are polite. They say please and thank you. They joke. They complain about the weather. They're human beings. Some German-American families seek permission to speak with prisoners. They share a language, sometimes even a hometown or region. These conversations are monitored but allowed. The prisoners hear about life in German-American communities, how immigrants maintained culture while embracing American identity, how German traditions coexist with American values. It's a preview of what post-war Germany could become. One prisoner's comment cuts to the heart of the matter. I liked it here because no one was shooting at me. It's simple, honest, and profound. War is hell. Captivity is boring. Given a choice between being shot at and being bored, most people pick bored. The lack of violence, the absence of fear, the certainty of waking up alive tomorrow. These are luxuries soldiers rarely experience. Democracy is observed in action. Loud, messy, chaotic democracy. Political protests in cities. Labor strikes at factories. Editorials demanding the president's resignation. All legal, all tolerated, all protected. How is this possible? They ask each other. How can a nation survive when people openly disagree? The answer becomes clear over time. Democracy survives because of open disagreement, not in spite of it. Arguments are how free societies process problems and find solutions. Out of 425,000 German POWs held in America, 2,222 attempted escape. That's barely 1%. The number is remarkably low compared to POW camps in other countries. The reason isn't better security, though. That helps. The reason is motivation. Why escape? Where would you go? America is enormous. The camps are spread across the interior, hundreds or thousands of miles from any border. Even if you made it to Canada, you'd be returned under international agreements. Mexico is no better. The ocean is an impossible barrier. There's no underground railroad for escaped German POWs. There's no sympathetic population hiding fugitives. You're in enemy territory. You look foreign. You barely speak English. Escape is pointless. Most attempts are recaptured within 24 hours. The escapees get hungry. They don't know where to find food. They don't know how to navigate. They stick out like sore thumbs. Local police pick them up easily. The punishment for attempting escape is usually solitary confinement for a few weeks. Not brutal, just isolating. Then back to the regular camp routine. 7 prisoners are never accounted for when repatriation happens. 7 out of 425,000. Did they successfully escape and build new lives under false identities? Did they die during escape attempts, their bodies never recovered? The records are incomplete. The mystery remains. Georg Gärtner becomes the most famous escaped German POW. He walks away from a work detail near Deming, New Mexico on September 21, 1945. The war is over. He should be going home soon anyway. But home is Silesia, which is now occupied by the Soviet Union. Gärtner doesn't want to return to communist rule. He disappears into America, living under assumed names, working odd jobs, staying invisible for decades. Eventually, in 1985, Gärtner comes forward. He's an old man by then, no longer a threat to anyone. His story makes newspapers. The government decides not to prosecute. Instead, he's granted residency. He lives out his remaining years legally, a footnote in history. His motivation for escaping wasn't to return to Germany. It was to stay in America. That tells you everything about how he viewed his captivity. The vast majority don't want to escape. This point bears repeating because it's so counterintuitive. They're prisoners of war. They're supposed to be desperate for freedom. Instead, they're relatively content. Better food than they had as soldiers, better living conditions, safety, structure. The war continues in Europe and the Pacific, killing millions. The prisoners in America are sitting it out in relative comfort. The unusual sight for Americans is seeing enemy soldiers in public spaces. High-ranking officers are sometimes allowed into local restaurants. Shopping trips to buy gifts for families back home. Supervised, monitored, but happening. The normalization is jarring. Last year, these men were trying to kill Americans. This year, they're buying postcards at the general store. The bitter irony surfaces again. That laundry that washes German POW clothes but refuses Tuskegee Airmen uniforms. The restaurants that serve German officers but won't serve black American soldiers. The swimming pools and movie theaters with whites only, signs that somehow don't apply to enemy combatants. Alexander Jefferson's statement haunts this narrative. Germans gave me more respect as a prisoner than America gave me as a citizen. He's a Tuskegee Airman who was shot down and held in a German POW camp. His comparison is damning. The enemy treated him better than his own country. What does that say about America? 1946. The war has been over for months. Repatriation begins. The prisoners are shipped back to Germany, sailing into a reality that's the opposite of what they experienced in America. Germany is ruins. Berlin is rubble. Dresden barely exists. Hamburg is flattened. The industrial cities of the Ruhr are destroyed. Millions are dead. Millions more are displaced. The economy has collapsed completely. There's no food, no fuel, no functioning infrastructure. This is the devastation total war brings when it's fought on your homeland. The shock of returning is worse than the shock of capture. The prisoners spent years in America, insulated from the destruction. They heard about it, read about it in newspapers. But hearing isn't the same as seeing. Walking through streets that used to be neighborhoods, now just endless fields of broken concrete and twisted metal. Looking for homes that no longer exist. Searching for families who might be dead. The psychological impact is crushing. Letters start arriving from America. Former captors sending care packages, food, clothing, medicine. Relationships formed during captivity continue across the ocean. Guards write to prisoners they supervised. Farmers stay in touch with workers who harvested their crops. Friendships that began in unusual circumstances persist through correspondence. Some of these relationships will last decades. 5,000 Germans who spent time as POWs in America eventually emigrate. They go through proper channels, apply for visas, wait their turn. When approved, they return to a country they first saw as prisoners. But this time, they're free men choosing to build lives in a place that treated them with unexpected decency. Thousands more return as visitors, tourists wanting to see the camps where they were held, reconnect with people they knew. Rudiger von Weckmar is captured as a young officer. After the war, he builds a diplomatic career. He spends 14 years in New York as Germany's representative to the United Nations. His time as a POW in America shaped his worldview, his understanding of democracy, his commitment to post-war German-American friendship. He's not unique. Many former POWs enter politics, business, academia, carrying with them the lessons learned in captivity. Veterans return to visit camps. Reunions are organized in Louisiana, Maine, Georgia. Former prisoners, now elderly, meet with former guards, also elderly. Townspeople who remember the camps join these gatherings. They share memories, compare perspectives, laugh about misunderstandings and cultural confusion. The local communities often don't realize how significant these camps were. Decades later, historical markers are erected. All but forgotten part of history, one states. Even people who live nearby don't know what happened there. 860 German POWs are buried in America. 43 burial sites across the country. Men who died of illness, accident, or, in a few cases, violence from fellow prisoners. Their graves are tended by German women's clubs, local veterans organizations, volunteers who believe in honoring the dead regardless of what side they fought on. Fresh flowers appear on graves. German flags fly on Remembrance Days. The respect shown to enemy dead says something profound about American values. The lasting impact on Americans who interacted with prisoners is equally significant. They found out enemy soldiers were human beings, not monsters, not caricatures, just men who happened to be born in a different country, conscripted into a war they might not have believed in, doing what soldiers do because that's what's required. They were just doing their jobs, happened to be on the opposite side. That realization doesn't excuse the Nazi regime's atrocities, but it humanizes the individual soldiers in a way that's psychologically important. The legacy of German POWs in America extends far beyond the camps themselves. The experience helped build American support for the Marshall Plan. Congress appropriated billions for European reconstruction, including Germany. That generosity wasn't inevitable. Plenty of Americans wanted Germany left in ruins permanently. But having seen Germans as people, having interacted with them, having formed relationships, it became harder to advocate for collective punishment. The political will for reconstruction existed partly because Americans realized Germans were capable of change. Comparison to American POWs in Germany provides context. German treatment of American prisoners varied widely. Officers were generally treated according to Geneva Convention standards. Enlisted men had it worse. Food was meager, accommodations cold and cramped, work requirements harsh. As the war dragged on and Germany's situation became desperate, conditions deteriorated further. Forced marches in the final months killed thousands. Disease and starvation were common. 93,941 American POWs passed through German camps. About 3% died in captivity, compared to over 30% who died in Japanese camps. German treatment was poor but not deliberately brutal like the Japanese system. The contrast with American treatment of German POWs is stark. America could afford generosity. The homeland was untouched. The economy was booming. The food supply was abundant. Treating prisoners well wasn't a sacrifice. It was easy. Germany, fighting a losing war with increasing desperation, couldn't maintain the same standards even if it wanted to. Resources that might have improved POW conditions were needed elsewhere. The comparison isn't entirely fair, but it matters. The unusual sight that changed everything wasn't American military power, though that was impressive. It wasn't technological superiority, though that was real. It was the simple, visible proof that democracy works and abundance is possible. German prisoners expected bombed-out factories and starving populations. They found department stores full of goods. They expected resentment and brutality. They found friendship and Geneva Convention compliance. They expected a nation on the verge of collapse. They found the most powerful economy on earth operating at full capacity. What they learned in those camps, they took back to Germany. Democracy works. Abundance is possible. War is unnecessary. Individual rights matter. Free speech strengthens society rather than weakening it. These aren't abstract concepts. They're observed facts, proven through daily experience. The men who learned these lessons helped rebuild Germany as a democratic nation. They entered politics, business, education, bringing with them an understanding of how free societies function. The final irony is perfect. Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. Germany declared war on America in support of Japan. That decision brought 425,000 German soldiers to America as prisoners. Those prisoners became convinced Democrats, not through force or propaganda, but through example. They returned to Germany and helped build the democratic, prosperous nation that became America's closest European ally. The attack meant to destroy America's will to fight ended up creating a generation of Germans who admired American values and worked to implement them at home. They came as enemies and left as friends. That's not hyperbole. That's documented fact. The relationships formed in those camps lasted lifetimes. The lessons learned shaped post-war Europe. The unusual sight German POWs encountered in America was more powerful than any weapon. It was the sight of a free society functioning successfully even under the stress of total war. It was prosperity so abundant that even prisoners of war could share in it. It was humanity extended even to those who came as conquerors. That's what defeated Nazi ideology more effectively than any battle. Not the firepower or the strategic bombing or the tank divisions. Those won the military conflict. But the ideological victory, the transformation of German thinking, happened in POW camps scattered across America. In mess halls where prisoners ate better than they had as free soldiers. In barracks where they slept safely while the world burned. In work fields where they harvested American abundance. In conversations with guards and farmers and townspeople who treated them as human beings rather than monsters. The most unusual sight was America's power, but not the kind of power measured in bombs and bullets. It was the power of a system that works, the power of abundance created by free people in a free economy, the power of values so strong that even enemies could be treated with dignity without weakening the nation. That's what stunned those German prisoners. That's what changed them. That's what they remembered for the rest of their lives. And some of them, 5,000 to be exact, couldn't forget it. So they came back, not as prisoners this time, but as immigrants, choosing America, choosing freedom, choosing the unusual sight that had become the most important thing they'd ever witnessed.